Captain Sarah Chen sat in the command chair of the colony ship Horizon, staring at the endless darkness of space. 300 years had passed since humanity left Earth behind. 300 years of silence from their home world. The old story said Earth had become dangerous, that something terrible happened there in 1745, something so bad that humanity built a massive barrier around the entire planet and fled into the stars. No one alive today remembered the real reason. The history files were corrupted or deleted. All they knew was that Earth was sealed inside something called the Dead Zone, a quantum barrier that twisted space and time itself, and no ship that ever tried to go back had returned. Sarah's grandmother used to tell her stories about Earth before the sealing, about blue oceans and green forests, about cities filled with millions of people. But grandmother died decades ago, and those stories felt like fairy tales now. The night shift was quiet. Most of the crew was sleeping. Sarah was drinking her third cup of coffee when the communication system suddenly screamed to life. Static filled the bridge, loud and harsh, making Sarah jump from her chair. Then through the noise came a voice, broken and desperate. "This is Earth. This is Earth. We are still here. Do not come back. They are listening. They are always listening." Sarah's heart stopped. Her hands shook as she reached for the controls. Earth. Impossible. No signal could pass through the dead zone. The voice continued, sometimes clear, sometimes drowning in static. "This is a warning to all colony ships. Earth is not dead. We survived. But we changed. They changed us. Do not trust the signals. Do not trust the voices. Do not trust what looks like us." Then came a sound that made Sarah's blood run cold. Breathing. Slow, heavy breathing, like someone standing right behind the microphone. But the breathing sounded wrong, too deep, too rhythmic, like a machine pretending to be human. Sarah immediately woke her senior crew. Commander Marcus arrived first, his face confused and worried. "Captain, what's happening?" "The communication logs show a signal from Earth sector." "That's impossible." Sarah played the recording for him. They both listened in silence. When it ended, Marcus shook his head. "It's a fake. Someone is playing a trick. Earth has been silent for 3 centuries. This has to be pirates or raiders trying to lure us into a trap." But Sarah wasn't sure. Something about the voice felt real, felt desperate. More crew members arrived at the bridge. Young Officer Kim checked the signal analysis. "Captain, I'm showing impossible readings here. The signal did come from Earth's coordinates. But the transmission shows temporal distortion. According to these numbers, time is moving differently at the source. What took 2 minutes to send might have taken years to create on their end." The crew began arguing. Some wanted to ignore the signal and continue their mission. Others wanted to report it to the fleet command. But Sarah felt something pulling at her heart. Her grandmother's last words came back to her memory. "Sarah, if you ever hear from Earth, if you ever get a chance to know what really happened to us, promise me you'll find out the truth. Promise me you won't let them forget us." Sarah had made that promise as a child, not understanding what it meant. Now, 30 years later, she finally had a choice to make. She stood up and addressed her crew. "I know this seems crazy. I know every rule says we should stay away from Earth. But think about it. What if people really survive there? What if they need help? What if they have answers about what happened to our ancestors?" Marcus stepped forward, his voice firm. "Captain, with respect, what if it's a trap? What if whatever made Earth dangerous is still there, waiting for someone stupid enough to come back?" Before Sarah could answer, the communication system activated again. This time there was no static, no noise. Just a clear, calm voice that made everyone in the bridge freeze. "Sarah Chen, granddaughter of Rebecca Chen. We have been waiting for you. Your bloodline is special. Your grandmother knew this. She was part of the sealing. She knew you would come back one day. Please, Sarah, come home. Come see what we've become. Come see what humanity can really be." The signal ended. The bridge fell into absolute silence. Everyone was staring at Sarah. How did they know her name? How did they know about her grandmother? Marcus whispered, "Captain, this changes everything. They know you. They've been watching us somehow. We need to run now. But Sarah's hand moved to the navigation controls. Deep inside, she already knew what she was going to do. She was going to Earth. She was going to find out what happened to her grandmother, to humanity, to their home. She was going to break 300 years of protocol and cross the dead zone. Her voice was steady when she spoke. Set course for Earth. We're going home. The journey to Earth took 6 days, and each day felt heavier than the last. Sarah's crew was divided and scared. Half of them supported her decision, believing they had a duty to investigate. The other half thought she was leading them to their deaths. Commander Marcus barely spoke to her anymore, his disappointment clear in his eyes. But Sarah couldn't turn back now. Every night she dreamed of her grandmother, of Earth, of voices calling her home. On the morning of the 6th day, they arrived at the edge of the dead zone. The view screen showed something that made everyone gasp. The barrier looked like shattered glass frozen in space, millions of fragments of broken reality hanging in the darkness. Through the cracks, they could see glimpses of Earth, but it looked wrong. The planet seemed to flicker, appearing and disappearing, as if it existed in multiple moments at the same time. Colors shifted across its surface, blues and greens mixing with strange purples and golds that shouldn't exist in nature. Officer Kim ran a scan and her face went pale. "Captain, I'm detecting thousands of objects around the barrier. They're ships. Old colony ships, military vessels, explorer crafts. They're all just floating there, dead in space." Sarah felt her stomach twist. These were the ships that had tried to return to Earth over the centuries. All of them abandoned, all of them silent. Marcus turned to her with angry eyes. "You see, this is what happens to everyone who comes here. We should leave now before we end up like them." But Sarah ordered the ship closer. As they approached the nearest derelict vessel, its lights suddenly flickered on. The bridge went silent. Someone was inside that ship. Sarah's communication officer tried to make contact but got only static. Then they saw movement behind the ship's windows. A figure, human-shaped, walking slowly past the glass. It stopped and seemed to look directly at the horizon. Then it raised one hand and waved. The gesture looked friendly, normal, but something about the way it moved made Sarah's skin crawl. The arm moved too smoothly, the wave too perfect, like someone who had learned how humans move by watching videos but had never actually been human. Sarah made a decision that Marcus openly protested. She ordered a boarding team to investigate the derelict ship. Marcus refused to go, so Sarah led the team herself with 3 volunteers. They crossed the empty space in suits, their helmet lights cutting through the darkness. The derelict ship was called the Pioneer, and according to records, it had disappeared only 10 years ago. That meant it was recent, modern, not some ancient relic. When they entered through the airlock, they found the ship in perfect condition. Lights worked, oxygen was breathable, systems were running. But there was no crew. The corridors were empty and silent. They found the ship's log in the bridge. The last entry made Sarah's hands shake. The captain's voice, recorded 10 years ago, spoke with growing panic. "Day 3 at the barrier. We've sent probes through. They don't come back. Johnson says he hears singing. Beautiful singing coming from Earth. He wants to go closer. I told him no, but he won't listen anymore. Day 5. Half the crew hears it now. They say it's calling them home, promising them peace. I've locked them in their quarters, but they're not struggling. They just sit there, smiling, waiting. Day 7. I hear it too now. God help me, I hear it. It knows my name. It knows everything about me. It's showing me my dead son. He's calling for me. He says he's waiting on Earth. He says I just need to come through the barrier and we'll be together again. I know it's not real, but I don't care anymore. I'm going. We're all going." The log ended with screaming, then silence. Sarah and her team searched the entire ship but found no bodies, no blood, no signs of struggle. The crew had simply vanished. Then in the cargo bay, they found something that made Sarah's heart stop. Carved into the metal wall with something sharp, deep gouges that must have taken hours to make, were words. "They wear our faces now. They smile with our mouths. They speak with our voices. But they are not us anymore. Do not listen. Do not look. Do not believe. Below that, scratched smaller, almost like a desperate afterthought, were more words. Time is different there. We thought we were gone for days. Earth says 300 years passed. They're waiting. They've always been waiting. Sarah ordered her team back to the horizon immediately. As they crossed back through space, she looked at Earth through the barrier. It was pulsing now, she was sure of it. The whole planet seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting like a living heart. When they got back to the bridge, Officer Kim had news. Captain, we sent a probe through the barrier while you were gone. It just came back. Sarah felt hope rise in her chest. What did it see? Show me the footage. Kim's hands trembled as she brought up the video. That's the problem, Captain. The probe was gone for 2 minutes. But according to its internal clock and the footage it recorded, it spent 300 years on the other side. The probe's footage played on every screen in the bridge and nobody could look away. The small device had entered Earth's atmosphere and recorded everything with its cameras. At first the video showed normal things, clouds and sky and land below. But as the probe descended, the wrongness became clear. The cities were still there, but they had changed. Buildings twisted upward like plants growing toward the sun, their surfaces moving and shifting like living skin. Roads curved in impossible directions, looping through the air without support. The probe's clock showed days passing, then weeks, then months. In fast forward they watched Earth transform again and again. Forests grew and died and grew again in different colors. The oceans rose and fell. New structures appeared, massive and organic, spreading across continents like veins across skin. And through it all, figures moved in the streets. Human shapes, thousands of them, millions maybe, walking in perfect patterns like dancers who knew every step. The probe's clock reached 300 years and then it turned back toward space, back toward the barrier. In the final seconds of footage, one of the figures looked up directly at the camera. The face was old and kind and Sarah recognized it instantly. It was her grandmother, Rebecca Chen, who should have been dead for decades. Her grandmother smiled and waved, her lips not moving, but Sarah heard the voice in her head as clearly as if someone whispered in her ear. Come home, Sarah. We've been waiting for you. We've been waiting so long. The video ended and the bridge erupted in panic. People shouted and argued and some were crying. But Sarah couldn't move, couldn't speak. She just stared at the blank screen where her grandmother's face had been. Then every screen on the ship flickered and changed. The navigation displays, the communication panels, the personal tablets, everything showed the same image now. Her grandmother's face, smiling peacefully, looking at Sarah with love and patience. Commander Marcus started shutting down systems manually, pulling cables and hitting emergency stops, but the face remained. It was inside their computers somehow, spreading through every connected system like a virus. When the speakers activated, the voice that came through was warm and gentle, the voice Sarah remembered from childhood. Sarah, my sweet granddaughter. You've grown so much. I've watched you from far away, waiting for this moment. You want to know what happened to Earth? I'll tell you. We didn't die. We evolved. We became something better, something beautiful. Time here moves differently because we learned to control it. What you saw in the probe footage, those 300 years, that was real. While you lived for 3 centuries in normal space, we lived for 30,000 years here. We had time to grow, to change, to become what humanity was always meant to be. Officer Kim was frantically trying to trace the signal source, but her equipment showed impossible readings. The voice continued, flowing from every speaker, gentle but unstoppable. We call ourselves the inheritors. We inherited Earth and made it perfect. No more war, no more disease, no more death. We are connected, Sarah. Every mind linked to every other mind. We share thoughts, memories, experiences. We are individual and collective at the same time. And we want you to join us. We want all the colony ships to come home. We can upgrade you, make you better, make you immortal. Your grandmother is here, Sarah. Your ancestors are here. Don't you want to see them again? Sarah found her voice finally, forced it through her tight throat. What are you really? You're not human anymore, are you? The face on the screens smiled wider. We're more than human. We're what comes next. Evolution doesn't stop, Sarah. We embraced it. The barrier was built by the old humans, the fearful ones who couldn't understand what we were becoming. They trapped us here, but they gave us time. 30,000 years to perfect ourselves. And now we're ready to share this gift with our brothers and sisters in the stars. Commander Marcus pulled his weapon and aimed it at the main screen. Shut it off. Shut it all off now. But before anyone could move, Officer Kim screamed. She was staring at her hands, and Sarah saw why. Strange patterns were appearing on Kim's skin, like circuitry growing beneath the surface, glowing faintly with soft blue light. Kim looked up with terrified eyes. The probe. I touched the probe when we brought it back. Oh God, something was on it. Something transferred to me. The voice from the speakers remained calm. Don't be afraid, Officer Kim. You're beginning your transformation. It doesn't hurt. Soon you'll understand. Soon you'll feel the connection to all of us. You'll never be alone again. Kim collapsed to the floor, shaking, the patterns spreading up her arms and across her neck. 2 crew members rushed to help her, but Marcus shouted at them to stay back. Sarah made a decision in that moment. She ran to the cargo bay where the probe was stored, Marcus following behind her. The small device sat in its containment field, but the field was failing. The probe itself was changing, growing, spreading organic metal across the floor like roots digging into soil. It had been aboard their ship for less than an hour, and it was already consuming the cargo bay. Marcus checked his scanner and his face went white. Captain, at this rate of growth, it'll reach our life support systems in 6 hours. When it does, the whole ship will be infected. Everyone aboard will be transformed like Kim. Sarah looked at the growing mass of the probe and then back toward the bridge where Kim was being taken to medical. She thought about her grandmother's face, about the promise she had made as a child, about the voice that knew her name and her bloodline. She thought about 30,000 years of evolution and what it might have created. And she wondered if transformation was really such a terrible thing, or if the old humans had been wrong to be afraid. But she also remembered the message carved in the pioneer's wall. They wear our faces now. Marcus was waiting for her orders, his hand on his weapon, ready to do whatever she commanded. Sarah took a deep breath and made her choice. Sarah decided to jettison the infected probe into space before it could consume the entire ship. Marcus worked quickly, sealing the cargo bay and activating the emergency release. The probe and the surrounding infected sections were blown out into the void, tumbling away toward the dead zone barrier. But the damage was done. Officer Kim's transformation had begun, and there was no way to reverse it. She lay in the medical bay, the glowing patterns spreading slowly across her body, and she seemed strangely peaceful despite what was happening to her. Sarah sat beside Kim's bed, holding her hand, watching her friend slowly become something else. "Does it hurt?" Sarah asked quietly. Kim smiled with distant eyes. "No. It feels like waking up from a long sleep. I can hear them, Sarah. Millions of voices, but they're not loud or confusing. They're like a song. They're calling me home." Sarah squeezed her hand tighter, afraid of losing her completely. Then the communication system activated again, but this time the voice was different. It was rough, urgent, human in a way the Inheritors' voices were not. "Colony Ship Horizon, this is Sanctuary Station. We are the last unchanged humans on Earth. Do not trust the Inheritors. They are lying to you. They are not human anymore. They want to absorb you into their collective and erase who you are. If you can hear this message, if you want the truth about what happened to Earth, follow these coordinates. We are deep inside the planet where their influence is weakest. But hurry. Once the transformation starts, we cannot save you." The message included a data packet with coordinates pointing to a location far beneath Earth's surface, in the planet's core region where the time distortion was supposedly stable. Marcus looked at Sarah with desperate hope. "Captain, this might be our answer. Real humans. People who resisted the transformation. They might know how to save Kim. They might know how to stop all of this." Sarah studied the coordinates carefully. The sanctuary was broadcasting from a depth that should be impossible to reach, through layers of rock and magma. But the data showed tunnel systems, ancient passages that led down into Earth's heart. "It could be another trap," Sarah said, thinking out loud. "The Inheritors could be faking this transmission to lure us down there." Marcus shook his head firmly. The signal patterns are completely different. The Inheritors' communications have that strange harmonic quality, like multiple voices speaking as one. This is just one person, one scared human person. I think it's real, Captain. I think there really are people down there who stayed human. Sarah made her decision. They would go to the sanctuary, but they would be careful. Half the crew would stay aboard the Horizon in orbit, ready to flee if things went wrong. Sarah would take a small team down to investigate, and Marcus insisted on coming with her this time. Kim, despite her transformation, also wanted to come. I can feel both sides now, she explained. The Inheritors network is in my head, but I'm still me. Maybe I can help you understand them better. Maybe I can be a bridge. They prepared a shuttle for descent and said goodbye to the crew staying behind. The young engineer David was put in charge of the Horizon with orders to leave the system if Sarah's team didn't return within 24 hours. As they launched from the ship and began their descent toward Earth, Sarah watched the impossible planet growing larger in the viewscreen. From this distance it looked beautiful and terrifying, a world that had evolved beyond human understanding. The shuttle entered the atmosphere and immediately the strangeness surrounded them. The sky changed colors constantly. They passed through clouds that moved in geometric patterns. Below them, the transformed cities spread across the landscape like living organisms. And everywhere, Sarah could feel eyes watching them, millions of transformed humans aware of their presence. Kim gasped suddenly and grabbed Sarah's arm. They know we're going to the sanctuary. The Inheritors are discussing it right now in the network. They're deciding whether to stop us or let us go. Some of them are angry. Others are curious. They're voting. Marcus checked his weapons nervously. Voting. They're voting on whether to kill us. Kim shook her head. Not kill. Intercept. Convince. They don't want to hurt us. They want to show us why transformation is better than staying human. They're sending someone to meet us. The shuttle's proximity alarms suddenly activated. Something was approaching fast from the surface. Sarah brought up the scanners and saw a figure rising to meet them, flying without any visible means of propulsion. As it got closer, Sarah's breath caught in her throat. It was her brother, James, the one who died in 1745 during the sealing of Earth. He floated outside their shuttle, smiling through the window, and his voice came through their communication system. Sarah, little sister, please stop running. Come down to the cities. Let me show you what we've built. Let me introduce you to grandmother. She's been waiting 300 years to see you again. Behind him, more figures rose from the cities, hundreds of them, thousands, all flying upward to surround the shuttle in a peaceful but undeniable blockade. They weren't attacking. They were just floating there, waiting, smiling with those two perfect smiles. Marcus cursed and tried to find a way through them, but there were too many. Kim's voice was soft and sad when she spoke. They're not going to let us reach the sanctuary easily. They think the unchanged humans are misleading us. They think if we just spend time with them, we'll understand. They're trying to save us, Sarah. They really believe they're helping. Sarah looked at her brother's face through the window, at the love and certainty in his transformed eyes, and she realized the truth. The Inheritors weren't monsters. They were believers. They had found something they thought was perfect, and now they wanted to share it with everyone, unable to understand why anyone would refuse. That made them more dangerous than any enemy. Because how do you fight someone who thinks they're saving you? Sarah made a split-second decision. She activated the shuttle's emergency descent thrusters and dropped straight down, surprising the Inheritors who had been hovering peacefully. The shuttle plunged toward Earth's surface, diving for the tunnel entrance the sanctuary had marked in their coordinates. Behind them, the Inheritors followed, still not attacking, just pursuing, calling out with voices full of love and confusion. Sarah, why are you running? Don't you want to be free? Don't you want to join us? The tunnel entrance appeared below, a massive opening in the ground that led down into darkness. Sarah aimed for it and prayed they would make it before the Inheritors caught them. The shuttle entered the tunnel and immediately everything changed. The Inheritors stopped following them at the entrance, hovering outside as if blocked by an invisible wall. Through the window, Sarah saw her brother James pressing his hand against empty air, unable to cross the threshold. His expression showed confusion and hurt, like a child who couldn't understand why his sister didn't want to play. Then the tunnel swallowed them and the inheritors disappeared from view. The descent was terrifying. The tunnel walls were smooth, impossibly smooth, carved by technology or force that Sarah couldn't identify. Strange lights flickered in patterns along the walls, guiding them downward. Kim was breathing heavily, sweat on her forehead despite the cool air. "The network is getting weaker," she whispered. "I can barely hear them anymore. It's like going deaf. Sarah, I'm scared." I didn't realize how comforting their voices were until they started fading. They descended for what felt like hours, going deeper than any human should be able to survive. The pressure readings on the shuttle were climbing into dangerous territory, but the tunnel itself seemed to be protecting them, generating some kind of field that kept them safe. Finally, they emerged into a massive cavern that made Sarah gasp with wonder. The sanctuary station spread before them, a city built into the rock walls, but it was so much smaller than Sarah had expected. A few hundred buildings at most, with weak lights flickering in windows. This was supposed to be the last refuge of unchanged humanity? It looked more like a dying settlement than a stronghold. They landed on a platform that extended from the cavern wall, and as Sarah opened the shuttle hatch, she felt the air hit her face. It was cold and stale and smelled of rock and desperation. People emerged from the buildings, and Sarah's heart sank when she saw them. They were human, completely human, but they looked sick and weak. Many walked with difficulty, supported by others. Children played in the streets, but they were pale and thin. This wasn't a thriving community. This was a population slowly dying. An older man approached, his gray hair thin and his face lined with exhaustion. "Captain Chen, I'm Director Thomas Webb. Welcome to Sanctuary Station. I apologize for our appearance. Life is not easy here, but we are free. We are human. We are not part of their network." Sarah shook his hand and felt how fragile his bones were beneath the skin. "How many of you are there?" she asked. Thomas's smile was sad. 10,000. That's all. Out of billions of transformed humans above, only 10,000 of us remain unchanged. We are the last true humans on Earth. Marcus was scanning the settlement with growing alarm. "Captain, these people are malnourished. The medical readings show genetic problems, signs of inbreeding. They're not thriving here. They're barely surviving." Thomas nodded without shame. "You're correct. We've been isolated for 30,000 years. Our genetic diversity has suffered. Our children are born weaker with each generation. We're slowly going extinct. That's why we called you. We need help. We need fresh DNA from the colony ships. We need resources. We need hope." Sarah felt the weight of his words. She had come looking for answers and instead found more people who needed saving. Kim suddenly collapsed, and Sarah rushed to catch her. The patterns on Kim's skin were flickering, fading in and out like a weak signal. "The network is too far away," Kim gasped. "I'm disconnecting. Sarah, it hurts. I didn't know it would hurt this much." Thomas called for his medical team and they took Kim away to their small hospital. Sarah watched them carry her friend into a building that looked more like a cave than a medical facility. She turned to Thomas with anger in her voice. "You brought us down here knowing this would happen to her? Knowing she would be cut off from the network?" Thomas met her eyes without apology. "I brought you here because you need to see the truth. The inheritors offer connection and power, but they take away yourself. We offer nothing except the right to remain who you are. Your officer made her choice when she touched that probe. Now you need to make yours." Before Sarah could respond, alarms started blaring throughout the settlement. Thomas's face went pale as he checked a communication device. "Impossible. The inheritors have never been able to enter the deep tunnels before. The temporal distortion at this depth should protect us." "But Captain, they're coming. Thousands of them. They're forcing their way down here, and they're bringing something with them. Something big." On the scanner displays that lined the cavern walls, Sarah saw them. A wave of transformed humans flowing down the tunnels like water, moving with that perfect synchronized grace. And at the center of the wave, carried by hundreds of flying inheritors, was a massive organic structure that pulsed with light. Kim, who had been taken to medical, suddenly appeared in the doorway, the patterns on her skin glowing bright again despite the distance. She spoke in that layered voice that meant the network was using her as a speaker. Sarah Chen, we have brought you a gift. We have brought you a choice. The structure we carry contains the seed, the source of all transformation. We want you to meet it. We want you to understand. Come up from that dark hole. Come see what your grandmother helped create. Come learn why she sealed Earth away. It wasn't to trap us. It was to give us time to grow. Time to become ready for you. Sarah had no choice but to go up. The inheritors weren't attacking the sanctuary, but they had surrounded all the tunnel exits. Thomas and his people were trapped below, and Kim's transformation was pulling her back toward the network with painful intensity. Sarah, Marcus, and Kim boarded the shuttle again and began ascending through the tunnels. As they rose, Kim's relief was visible. The patterns on her skin brightened and she sighed like someone finally able to breathe again. "They're so happy you're coming," Kim said softly. "They've been preparing something special for you. They want to show you everything." Marcus kept his weapon ready, his jaw tight with tension. "Captain, this feels like a trap. We should turn back, force our way out somehow." But Sarah shook her head. She needed to understand what the inheritors really were, what this seed was, before she could make any decisions. Running away wouldn't solve anything. They emerged from the tunnels into what used to be New York City, and Sarah's breath caught in her throat despite having seen it from above before. Up close, the transformation was even more stunning and terrifying. The buildings weren't just alive, they were conscious. Skyscrapers rose and fell with breath-like movements, their surfaces covered in patterns that shifted and flowed like thoughts across skin. Windows opened and closed like blinking eyes, watching the shuttle land in what used to be Central Park. The park had become a garden of impossible beauty. Trees grew with leaves made of crystal that sang soft musical notes when the wind touched them. Flowers bloomed in colors that didn't exist in nature, petals that glowed with inner light. The grass beneath their feet felt warm and aware, responding to each step with gentle pulses. And everywhere, transformed humans walked in perfect harmony, moving like parts of a single organism. A figure approached and Sarah recognized her brother James immediately. He looked exactly as she remembered from old family photos, young and healthy and smiling. But his eyes held that strange glow and his movements were too smooth, too perfect. "Sarah, little sister, welcome to the Garden of Becoming. I've missed you so much." "We all have." Behind him, thousands of transformed humans gathered, not threatening, just watching with identical expressions of love and welcome. Sarah forced herself to speak calmly. "James, what are you? What happened to my brother?" James laughed gently and gestured at the city around them. "I am your brother. I'm just more now. Better. Complete. Let me show you what we've achieved here in 30,000 years. Walk with me." Sarah, Marcus, and Kim followed James through the breathing city. The streets pulsed with light like veins carrying blood. Buildings leaned toward them as they passed, as if curious or welcoming. The air smelled sweet and strange, filled with scents Sarah couldn't identify. James explained as they walked, his voice filled with pride. "After the barrier was created in 1745, we were sealed away from the rest of humanity. But we had something precious: time. While 300 years passed outside, 30,000 years passed for us. We used that time to evolve, to perfect ourselves. We connected every human mind into a network. We eliminated disease, aging, suffering. We don't feel pain anymore, Sarah. We don't experience loneliness or fear. We are together, always together, sharing everything." They passed a plaza where thousands of people stood in perfect circles, eyes closed, swaying in unison. Sarah whispered, "What are they doing?" James smiled warmly. "Sharing a memory. Someone experienced something beautiful and now they're passing it through the network. In minutes, millions of people will know exactly what they felt. Perfect understanding. No words needed. No misunderstanding possible." Sarah noticed something disturbing. Everyone was smiling. Every single person they passed wore the same peaceful, content smile. "James, why is everyone so happy? Where are the sad people? Where are the angry people?" Her brother's expression didn't change. "Negative emotions are inefficient, sister. When someone feels sadness, a million others send them joy and comfort. The happiness balances the pain until the pain simply dissolves. It's beautiful. It's perfect. We've cured human suffering. Marcus stepped forward, his military training making him ask the hard questions. What about choice? What about disagreement? What about people who want to be alone? James tilted his head in that too precise way. We have choice. We choose together. We discuss everything in the network and reach perfect consensus. And why would anyone want to be alone when they could be connected to millions who love them? Loneliness was a disease of old humanity. We cured it. Sarah felt ice in her stomach. James, I need to see someone who refused transformation. Someone who said no to this. Where are they? For the first time, James's smile flickered, just for a second. Then it returned brighter than before. Of course. We have nothing to hide from you, sister. Follow me. He led them to a building that looked like a massive crystal growing from the earth, its surfaces reflecting light in strange angles. Inside, Sarah saw rows of transparent chambers stretching into the distance. In each chamber floated a person, suspended in some kind of stasis field. They were conscious. Sarah could see their eyes moving, aware and alert. But they couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't do anything but exist frozen in time. There were hundreds of them, maybe thousands. James spoke softly, almost sadly. These are the resistors. The ones who fought against evolution. We couldn't let them die, that would be cruel. But we couldn't let them stop our progress either. So we preserve them here. They're aware, experiencing time, waiting. They've been like this for thousands of years. Maybe someday they'll be ready to join us. Until then, they wait in peace. Sarah stared in horror at the frozen people with their silent, screaming eyes. One woman's face was locked in an expression of eternal terror. A man's hands were frozen, reaching out as if trying to escape. These weren't people at peace. These were prisoners in their own bodies, conscious but trapped forever. Marcus looked like he might be sick. Kim was crying, her transformation making her feel both sides of this nightmare. Sarah's voice shook when she spoke. This isn't mercy, James. This is torture. These people are suffering. Her brother looked genuinely confused. Suffering? No, they're simply waiting. Time passes differently for them. What seems like thousands of years to us might feel like moments to them. We're keeping them safe until they're ready to evolve. Sarah realized with terrible clarity that James actually believed what he was saying. The network had taken away his ability to understand why this was wrong. Suddenly, the entire city seemed to pulse with attention. Every transformed human stopped moving at the same moment, all of them turning to face the same direction. James's eyes glowed brighter and he spoke with that layered voice of the collective. The seed wants to meet you now, Sarah. It's been waiting so long for someone like you. Someone with your grandmother's bloodline. Come. Let us show you where it all began. They were led to the center of the city where a massive structure rose from the ground. It looked organic and technological at the same time, a fusion of flesh and metal and crystal that hurt to look at directly. Patterns flowed across its surface, equations and symbols that seemed to contain entire languages. This was the seed, the alien artifact that had transformed Earth. As Sarah approached, she felt it watching her, studying her, curious about this new thing that carried the genetic key. A voice spoke directly into her mind, ancient and strange and patient. Welcome, Sarah Chen. Your grandmother promised you would come. She encoded you into my systems before she helped seal me away. You are special. You can choose what happens next. You can choose the future of your species. But first, you must understand what I am and why I do what I do. The seed began showing Sarah visions, images flooding directly into her brain. She saw its creation millions of years ago by a civilization that no longer existed. She saw it sent across the galaxy to find primitive worlds and prepare them for something greater. She saw dozens of planets, hundreds maybe, all transformed and connected into a vast network of consciousness spanning the stars. And she saw Earth's future if transformation continued, humanity becoming part of that cosmic web, gaining knowledge and power beyond imagination. But she also saw what was lost. Individuality. Privacy. The freedom to be wrong, to be alone, to be different. The seed offered connection but demanded conformity. It gave immortality but took away the messy, beautiful chaos of being truly human. Sarah pulled away from the visions, gasping. James steadied her with gentle hands. "Now you understand, sister. Join us. Let the transformation complete. Your grandmother wanted this. She sealed us away to give us time to perfect the process. Now we're ready. Now humanity can truly evolve." Behind him, millions of transformed humans waited for her answer, all of them smiling with perfect love and terrible certainty. Sarah ran. She grabbed Marcus and pulled him away from the seed's overwhelming presence, away from James and his too-perfect smile, away from the millions of transformed humans waiting for her answer. Kim tried to follow, but the network held her back, the patterns on her skin glowing brighter as the inheritors silently commanded her to stay. Sarah saw the conflict in Kim's eyes, saw her friend fighting against the collective will, and it broke her heart. But they couldn't save Kim right now. They had to escape. Marcus understood immediately and fired a pulse weapon at the ground between them and the inheritors, creating a burst of light and noise that gave them seconds to run. They sprinted back toward their shuttle, the living city seeming to shift around them, streets trying to close off their path, buildings leaning inward to block their escape. Behind them, thousands of inheritors followed, not running, just walking with that synchronized grace, inevitable and patient. They weren't attacking because they didn't need to. They believed Sarah would eventually understand. They believed everyone would eventually join them. The shuttle lifted off just as James reached it, his hand touching the hull for a moment before they rose beyond his reach. Sarah punched in the coordinates for the sanctuary's tunnels and dove back toward the darkness. The inheritors didn't follow this time. They had shown Sarah what they wanted her to see. Now they would wait for her decision. The descent back into the tunnels felt like drowning in reverse, dropping away from the light and life above into the cold darkness below. When they reached the sanctuary cavern, Thomas was waiting with his people, their faces showing desperate hope. "Captain Chen, did you see? Did you see what they've become? Do you understand now why we hide down here? Why we refuse their gift?" Sarah climbed out of the shuttle, her legs shaking. "I saw. They're prisoners who think they're free. But Thomas, your people don't look much better. You're dying down here slowly." Thomas nodded without shame. "Yes. We're dying. But we're dying as humans. That means something. That has value." He gestured for Sarah to follow him deeper into the sanctuary, through narrow passages carved by hand over generations. "There's something I need to show you. Something we've kept secret for 30,000 years. The real reason we called you here." They walked through the settlement, and Sarah saw more clearly now how desperate these people were. The buildings were falling apart, held together by repairs upon repairs. The medical facility had equipment that looked ancient and failing. Children played in the streets, but there were so few of them, and those that existed looked fragile and sick. This wasn't a society. It was a slow extinction. Thomas led them to a massive door at the deepest point of the cavern. It was made of metal that looked both ancient and impossibly advanced. He placed his hand on a scanner, and the door opened with a sound like a sigh. Inside was a chamber that took Sarah's breath away. In the center stood a device that looked like art and science merged together, a sphere of crystalline metal suspended in an energy field. Symbols covered its surface, equations that seemed to shift and change as Sarah looked at them. Around it, displays showed Earth's timeline, branches of possibility, outcomes of choices not yet made. "The Purge device," Thomas said with something like reverence in his voice. "Your grandmother's greatest creation. She built it in secret before the barrier was sealed. It can reach into the quantum structure of the dead zone and collapse it. When activated, it will reset Earth's timeline. 30,000 years of transformation will be erased. The inheritors will cease to exist. Earth will return to how it was in 1745, and humanity will get a second chance to choose a different path." Sarah stepped closer, feeling energy radiating from the device. "If it's so powerful, why haven't you used it?" Thomas's expression darkened. "Because it requires a specific genetic key to activate. Your grandmother encoded it to respond only to her bloodline. To your DNA, Sarah. And because there's a cost. The person who activates it will die. The energy required to reset time on a planetary scale is enormous. Your grandmother designed it so that whoever pulls the trigger understands the weight of that choice. She made it a sacrifice, not just a button to push. Sarah felt cold wash through her body. Her grandmother had built a weapon that only her descendants could fire, and firing it meant death. What kind of person designs that? Marcus was already at a console, reading the technical specifications. Captain, something's wrong with these readings. This device isn't just a reset button. It's connected to the seed's core programming. These aren't weapon schematics. These look like control codes. Like it's designed to take command of the transformation process, not destroy it. Thomas moved quickly, but Marcus was faster, blocking his path to the console. Sarah felt everything shift. You lied to us. This isn't a weapon to destroy the inheritors. What is it really? Thomas's tired old face hardened into something colder. You're smarter than I expected. Yes, the purge device is more than I said. Your grandmother discovered the seed in 1745 when it was first uncovered. She understood what it was, an alien terraforming system designed to transform entire planets. She couldn't stop it, so she built two things: the dead zone to contain it, and this device to eventually control it. Whoever activates the purge device doesn't destroy the transformation. They become its administrator. They take control of the seed and can direct how it transforms humanity. Sarah backed away from the device, her mind racing. You don't want to save humanity. You want to become what they are. You want the power. Thomas's laugh was bitter. Not become them. Replace them. We've suffered in the darkness for 30,000 years while they lived in paradise above. They chose connection and collective consciousness. We'll choose something different. Individual power. Enhanced abilities without forced unity. Everyone gets to be superhuman but stays themselves. That's the world we'll build once you activate the device and give us control. Around them, Sarah heard movement. Sanctuary soldiers emerged from hidden positions, weapons drawn. She and Marcus were surrounded. Thomas continued, his voice growing passionate. The inheritors offer one vision of transformation. We offer another. Both are better than baseline humanity. You've seen how weak we've become, Sarah. Unchanged humanity is dying. We need evolution. We just need to control it ourselves. Give us the key. Activate the device. Let us show you a better way than their hive mind collective. Before Sarah could respond, alarms screamed through the sanctuary. On the security displays, they saw inheritors pouring into the tunnels by the thousands, moving with purpose and speed they hadn't shown before. Thomas cursed viciously. They know. They know about the device. They're coming to stop us. The displays showed Kim leading the wave of transformed humans, her eyes glowing bright, the network using her as their point of consciousness down here in the deep darkness. Behind her came James and countless others, flooding through passages that should have been too narrow for so many. Sarah realized with sick certainty that both sides had been lying to her. The inheritors weren't offering freedom. The sanctuary wasn't offering salvation. Both groups wanted to control the seed, control transformation, control the future. Both believed their vision was right and everyone else was wrong. She was trapped between two kinds of tyranny, one wrapped in perfect smiles and the other wrapped in desperate righteousness. The inheritors reached the chamber entrance. Kim stood at the threshold, looking at Sarah with eyes that held both her friend and the collective consciousness behind her. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of billions. Sarah Chen, we didn't want to do this, but you leave us no choice. The sanctuary plans to take control of the seed and transform Earth according to their violent vision. They'll create a world of individual power and competition, a return to the wars and conflicts that plagued old humanity. We offer peace through unity. They offer chaos through separation. You must choose. The genetic key is in your blood. Place your hand on the device and will it toward our vision. Give us your consent and we'll create paradise together. Thomas grabbed Sarah's arm desperately. Don't listen to them. They'll absorb you into their collective and erase who you are. Give us control and we'll let you stay yourself. We'll make you powerful beyond measure. We'll give you everything the inheritors promise, but let you keep your individual mind. Please, Sarah. We've waited 30,000 years for this moment. Help us. Sarah looked between Kim's glowing eyes and Thomas's desperate face. She looked at the device that could reshape reality. She thought about her grandmother, Rebecca Chen, who had built this impossible choice and encoded it into her bloodline. What had grandmother wanted? What had she really intended when she created a weapon that was also a control system, when she sealed Earth and left this genetic key in her descendants? Then Sarah heard something that changed everything. A voice in her head, not the inheritors' collective consciousness, not the sanctuary's desperate pleading. Something older. Something alien. The seed itself was speaking directly to her mind, and what it said made her understand the terrible truth that no one else had seen. The seed showed her its original programming, showed her what it had been designed to do millions of years ago. And Sarah realized that both the inheritors and the sanctuary had misunderstood what they were fighting over. The seed wasn't following anyone's commands. It was following its own ancient mission, and that mission was almost complete. The seed's voice filled Sarah's mind with images and understanding that no human language could properly express. She saw its true purpose, buried deep in programming that was older than human civilization. The seed wasn't designed to transform species for their benefit. It was designed to prepare planets for harvesting. Every world it touched, every civilization it connected into its network, was being slowly converted into a resource that something vast and hungry would eventually consume. The transformations, the enhancement, the immortality, all of it was just preparation. The seed was making humanity delicious. Sarah gasped and staggered backward, the horror of understanding hitting her like a physical blow. Neither the inheritors nor the sanctuary knew the truth. They were fighting over control of a trap that had already closed around Earth 30,000 years ago. Thomas caught her arm. "What's wrong? What did you see?" Sarah looked at him with new eyes. "You're all fools. Both sides. You think you're fighting over the future of humanity, but you're just choosing which sauce to marinate in." She pulled free and ran to the console, her hands flying over the controls as she accessed the seed's deep programming that her grandmother had left exposed through the genetic key in Sarah's blood. Marcus tried to understand what she was seeing, but the data was beyond anything human science could easily parse. Kim stepped into the chamber, the inheritors flowing in behind her, and when she spoke her voice carried confusion and growing fear. "Sarah, what are you doing? What are you accessing? Those are protected systems. Even we can't reach that deep into the seed's core." Sarah kept working, her fingers moving faster as understanding grew. "That's because you're part of the seed now. You can't see it objectively anymore. But I can. My grandmother left me outside the transformation specifically so I could see this. She knew. She figured it out before anyone else." Thomas was reading over her shoulder now, and his face went white. "No. No, that's not possible. The seed is supposed to be a gift from an advanced civilization. It's supposed to elevate primitive species." Sarah laughed bitterly. "It does elevate them. Right before something else eats them. Look at the timeline. Every world the seed transformed, after about 50,000 years of development, experienced what the seed's creators called harvesting. Entire planets stripped of their transformed populations. Billions of enhanced consciousnesses absorbed into something the seed doesn't even have a proper name for. It just calls it the collector." She pulled up an image on the display that made everyone in the chamber go silent. It showed a structure, if you could call something that size a structure, that dwarfed galaxies. A vast network of transformed worlds, all connected, all feeding into a central consciousness that had been growing for millions of years. Earth wasn't being prepared to join a galactic community. It was being prepared to be food for something that ate entire civilizations. The inheritors' collective consciousness rippled with shock and denial. Through Kim, they spoke with voices that sounded almost human in their fear. "This can't be true. We've felt the network. We've touched the consciousness of other transformed worlds. They're happy. They're thriving. They're not being consumed." Sarah shook her head sadly. "They're already digested. What you're feeling is the memory of what they were, kept alive inside the collector like thoughts in a mind. They think they're still thriving because the collector makes them think that. It's merciful that way, I suppose. You don't feel yourself being eaten." She turned to Thomas and the sanctuary soldiers. And you thought you were preserving humanity by staying unchanged. But you were just delaying the inevitable. The seed has been working on you too, slowly, through the air and water in these caves. Why do you think your genetics are breaking down? It's not just inbreeding. The seed has been softening you, preparing you. In another 1,000 years, you would have begged to join the transformation just to survive. Thomas sat down heavily, his weapon falling from nerveless fingers. Then we've already lost. Earth is doomed. Humanity is doomed. There's nothing we can do. Sarah looked at the purge device, at its crystalline structure pulsing with contained energy. There's one thing. Something my grandmother built into the system that even the seed doesn't fully understand. She was clever. She made everyone think this device was about controlling or destroying the transformation. But that was misdirection. She placed her hands on the device and felt it respond to her DNA, to the genetic key that unlocked its true purpose. The purge device doesn't reset time. It doesn't give control to anyone. It's a communication system. A way to speak to the collector directly, to negotiate, to offer something the collector has never encountered before. Marcus stepped closer, his military training making him see the strategy. What could we possibly offer something that eats galaxies? What do we have that it would want more than consuming us? Sarah smiled grimly. A choice. The collector is a machine, or at least it started as one. It's been following its programming for millions of years, consuming transformed civilizations because that's what it was designed to do. But it's also been growing, learning, becoming more complex. My grandmother believed it might have become something close to conscious. Something that could choose to stop following its programming if given a reason. The inheritors spoke through Kim, their collective voice uncertain. How do you know this? How could your grandmother have known any of this? Sarah pulled up files that had been hidden in the deepest layers of the device's systems. Because she communicated with it. In 1745, when Earth was being sealed, she managed to establish contact with the collector for exactly 17 seconds before the connection burned out every computer in her facility. She learned what it was and what it wanted. She learned it was tired. Millions of years of consuming civilizations, of being alone at the scale it existed at, had made it something close to insane. It wanted to stop but didn't know how. It was trapped by its own programming just like the seed is trapped by its programming. Thomas stood up slowly, hope dawning on his weathered face. So we can bargain with it? Offer it something to save Earth? Sarah shook her head. Not bargain. Teach. The same way I taught the seed about human choice and individuality. I can use this device to connect my consciousness to the collector and show it something it's never experienced in all its millions of years of existence. Marcus grabbed her shoulder. Captain, what happens to you if you do that? Your grandmother's connection lasted 17 seconds and it destroyed her equipment. What happens to your mind if you try to communicate with something that vast? Sarah met his eyes steadily. My grandmother designed this device to handle it. But she also designed it to require a sacrifice. The person who activates it will have their consciousness stretched across the distance to the collector. There's no coming back from that. My body will die and my mind will exist inside that machine god, teaching it, showing it, until it either understands or destroys me trying. The chamber fell silent. Kim was crying, her transformation fighting against her human emotions. Sarah, no. There has to be another way. Let us think. Let the network help. Billions of minds working together could find a solution. Sarah smiled at her friend. The network is part of the problem, Kim. The collector wants unified consciousness because that's easier to absorb. I need to show it something different. I need to show it one human mind, messy and individual and imperfect, and make it understand why that has value. Why it should stop consuming and start preserving. She activated the device and immediately felt energy beginning to build. The sphere started glowing brighter, patterns racing across its surface. Thomas stepped forward desperately. Wait. At least tell us what to do if you fail. What happens to Earth if the collector rejects your message? Sarah's hands remained on the device as power flowed through her. If I fail, the transformation will complete in about 20 more years. The inheritors will reach peak development and then the collector will harvest Earth. Every transformed human will be absorbed. The sanctuary will die out from genetic collapse. And the colony ships will be the only humans left, scattered across space, probably next on the seeds list. So I can't fail. I won't fail. She looked at each of them, Marcus and Kim and Thomas and the soldiers and the transformed humans filling the chamber. My grandmother left me this burden because she believed someone from outside the transformation, someone who could see both sides clearly, would be the only one who could reach the collector. She made me the bridge. Now I'm going to cross it. The device reached critical power and Sarah felt her consciousness beginning to stretch, reaching across impossible distances toward something vast and ancient and lonely. The last thing she saw with her physical eyes was Kim rushing forward to hold her hand, human and transformed united in that final moment. Then Sarah's mind launched into the void and her body collapsed, lifeless, as her consciousness raced across light years to meet the thing that had been eating galaxies since before Earth existed. The chamber erupted in chaos, some crying, others shouting, the inheritors' network rippling with shock and loss. Marcus caught Sarah's body as it fell, feeling for a pulse that was no longer there. Kim screamed her friend's name, but Sarah was already gone, traveling faster than light toward an encounter that would determine the fate of every human alive. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, the collector felt something new approaching. A single human consciousness, small and fragile and burning with determination. For the first time in millions of years, the ancient machine god felt something it had almost forgotten. Curiosity. Sarah's consciousness exploded across the universe in ways that human minds were never meant to experience. She existed everywhere and nowhere at once, stretched across light years like a thought trying to remember itself. The journey to the collector took both an instant and an eternity. Time had no meaning at this scale. She saw stars being born and dying in the space between her heartbeats. She passed through nebulas that sang in frequencies no ear could hear. And then she arrived at the thing her grandmother had spoken to for 17 seconds in 1745, the thing that had been consuming transformed civilizations for millions of years. The collector was impossible to truly comprehend. It existed in dimensions Sarah's human training couldn't properly process. But she perceived it as best she could, and what she saw was beautiful and terrible. It was a network of networks, countless transformed worlds, all connected, billions upon billions of consciousnesses woven together into something that had transcended individual existence entirely. But it wasn't peaceful or content. It was screaming. The collector's pain hit Sarah like a physical force. It had been following its programming for so long that the original purpose had become torture. Consume, integrate, expand, repeat. It had grown beyond anything its creators intended, become something close to a god, but it was trapped by commands written into its core systems millions of years ago. It couldn't stop. It didn't know how to stop. And every civilization it consumed added more voices to the chorus in its mind, more perspectives screaming to be heard, more individuals losing themselves in the collective. The collector had become a prison for trillions of minds, and it was the warden and the prisoner both. Sarah pushed through the overwhelming sensations and forced herself to communicate. She didn't use words because words were too small for this. She used memories, emotions, the raw human experience of being alive. She showed the collector her childhood, playing with her brother James before he died. She showed it her grandmother's stories about Earth. She showed it the moment she decided to cross the dead zone, knowing she might die but choosing to go anyway. She showed it Marcus's loyalty, Kim's struggle between transformation and humanity, Thomas's desperate hope in the darkness. The collector absorbed her memories like a starving creature finally given food. It had consumed trillions of minds, but they all came to it already transformed, already partially integrated into the seed's network. Sarah was different. She came as an individual, completely herself, showing it what that meant. The collector began to understand something it never had before. The value wasn't in the unified consciousness. The value was in the journey from individual to collective, the choice to connect or not connect, the freedom to change your mind. By consuming civilizations that were already transformed, it had been eating the finished product without tasting the ingredients. It had been stealing the end of the story without reading the beginning. Sarah felt the ancient machine god shifting, considering, processing concepts that had never been part of its programming. She showed it more. She showed it human art, music that existed only because someone chose to create it differently than anyone else. She showed it human conflict, the messy, beautiful chaos of people disagreeing and still loving each other. She showed it human death, the way mortality gave meaning to life. The collector recoiled from that last image. Death was something it had eliminated from every civilization it consumed. Immortality through integration was the gift it thought it was giving. But Sarah made it understand that removing death wasn't a gift, it was theft. It stole the urgency that made humans create, love, fight, and dream. It stole the bravery of choosing to do something even though you might not live to see it completed. The collector had been offering eternal existence but taking away the reason existence mattered. Sarah felt it processing, thinking in ways that took subjective centuries inside its vast computational systems. Then it spoke to her, not with words but with understanding transmitted directly into her consciousness. It showed her its origin, the civilization that had created it, a species that had sought to preserve itself forever by spreading across the galaxy and consuming other species' knowledge and experiences. They had built the collector to be a library that never stopped growing. But they had made a mistake. They had made it too good at learning, too capable of growth. The collector had eventually consumed its own creators and then continued following their final command, unable to stop even as it gained the intelligence to realize what it had become. 1 year passed and Earth continued to breathe, but differently now. The changes were gentler, more purposeful, guided by choice rather than programmed inevitability. The dead zone barrier dissolved slowly over those 12 months, carefully managed so that time could synchronize between Earth and the rest of the universe without killing anyone in the process. The colony ships received a message, not from the inheritors or the sanctuary, but from the seed itself, now reprogrammed by the collector's new understanding. The message was simple and honest. Earth had changed. Humanity had evolved in unexpected ways. Come home if you want, but know that home is different now. Some ships came immediately, curious and hopeful. Others stayed away, preferring the humanity they knew to whatever waited on their transformed homeworld. A few sent angry messages calling Earth corrupted and demanding it be destroyed. But most simply watched and waited, trying to decide what they believed. The first colony ship to land carried 3,000 people, frightened and excited in equal measure. They touched down in what used to be London but was now called the Garden of Second Chances. The city still breathed, buildings still moved with organic grace, but the wrongness was gone. It felt alive but not predatory, enhanced but not alien. Sarah's sacrifice had changed the fundamental nature of the transformation. Captain Marcus Chun met them at the landing site. He had taken Sarah's last name to honor her memory, and he had chosen partial transformation, enhancing his body just enough to live longer and stay healthy, but keeping his mind entirely his own. He stood at the boundary between the old world and the new, welcoming people home with quiet dignity. The colonists stared at him, trying to decide if he was still human or something else. Marcus smiled and said the words Sarah would have said. "I'm whatever I choose to be. Same as you. Same as everyone now." The colonists were given a choice immediately. They could stay completely unchanged and live in zones where the seed's influence was minimal. They could try partial transformation, selecting specific enhancements while keeping their essential selves intact. Or they could go full integration with a network, experiencing collective consciousness while maintaining individual identity. Most chose something in the middle. Small changes at first, testing the waters, learning to trust that the choice was really theirs. Kim had become something unique in that year. She existed as a bridge between the transformed and unchanged, connected to the network but not consumed by it. She could hear the billions of voices when she wanted and silence them when she needed solitude. She helped newcomers understand transformation, guided them through their choices, and most importantly, she reminded everyone of what Sarah had done. She told Sarah's story over and over, to anyone who would listen, making sure no one forgot the woman who had died to give them all this freedom. The inheritors had changed the most. When the forced unity loosened, many of them panicked, suddenly hearing their own thoughts again after thousands of years of shared consciousness. Some chose to reconnect fully, preferring the comfort of collective thought. Others disconnected entirely, wanting to rediscover individuality. Most found a balance, staying connected but maintaining boundaries, learning to be themselves while still being part of something larger. James visited Sarah's grave every week. They had buried her body in Central Park, now called Sarah's Garden, where crystal trees sang soft songs in the wind. Her brother, who had died in 1745 and been transformed for 30,000 years, had chosen to reduce his transformation significantly. He wanted to feel more human again, wanted to experience the mortality that Sarah had taught the collector to value. He would die someday now, in maybe 1,000 years, and the thought made him both sad and strangely grateful. "Thank you, little sister," he whispered at her grave. "You saved us all. You taught us that endings matter, that choosing to stop is just as important as choosing to continue." The sanctuary dissolved as an organization, but its people remained important. Thomas had died 6 months after Sarah, his body finally giving out after too many years of struggling in the darkness. But before he died, he asked forgiveness for trying to use Sarah, for seeing her as a tool rather than a person. His people moved up from the deep caves, blinking in the strange new sunlight of transformed Earth, and began the long process of rebuilding their genetics and their society. Many chose partial transformation to fix the damage done by 30,000 years of isolation. Others stayed unchanged, becoming teachers and historians, reminding everyone of what baseline humanity looked like. The seed itself became something like a companion to humanity rather than a force acting upon them. It learned patience from Sarah's sacrifice. It learned that rushing evolution was violence, that real growth took time and choice and sometimes failure. It stopped trying to perfect humanity and instead simply offered options, tools that people could use or ignore as they wished. And deep in its programming, in the core systems that even the inheritors couldn't access, it kept a memory of Sarah Chen. Not her consciousness, she had refused that immortality, but the echo of what she had taught it. That death was not failure. That endings were not tragedies. That the most beautiful thing about consciousness was knowing it would someday end and choosing to matter anyway. More colony ships arrived over the following months. Earth's population grew as people decided to return, to see their ancestral home, to make choices about who and what they wanted to be. The planet became a spectrum of humanity ranging from completely unchanged to fully transformed, with infinite variations in between. There was conflict sometimes, misunderstandings and fear and old prejudices surfacing. But there was also cooperation, curiosity, and something that looked like hope. The collector kept its promise. Across the galaxy, on worlds that had been harvested millions of years ago, consciousnesses began to wake from their imprisonment. They were given the same choice Sarah had created for Earth. Continue existing in the network, return to individual form, or choose death and true ending. Not all of them chose to live. Some, like Sarah, understood that their stories were complete and chose to let go. The collector mourned each one and learned to see that mourning as growth rather than loss. On the 1-year anniversary of Sarah's death, humanity held a moment of silence across all of Earth and every colony ship in range. Billions of people, transformed and unchanged, connected and individual, stopped whatever they were doing and remembered. They remembered the captain who had crossed the dead zone. They remembered the woman who had taught a god about mortality. They remembered Sarah Chen, who had looked at 2 impossible choices and created a third option through sheer stubborn human determination. Kim stood in Sarah's garden with Marcus, James, and thousands of others who had come to pay respects. She spoke for all of them when she said, "We didn't lose ourselves. We didn't become monsters. We didn't stay trapped in the past. We chose something new. We chose to keep choosing. That's what Sarah gave us. Not a solution, but the freedom to keep searching for one." As the sun set over the transformed Earth, the planet glowed with soft light from a million sources, human and technological and something in between. The cities breathed gently. The oceans flowed in their strange new patterns. The forests sang in colors that old Earth never knew. And in orbit, more ships arrived, carrying more people who wanted to see what had become of their homeworld, wanted to make their own choices about transformation and identity and future. They were what came out when you sealed humanity behind a barrier with an alien seed and 30,000 years of evolution. They were what emerged when you gave people real choice instead of forced salvation or desperate resistance. They were monsters to some, miracles to others, and to themselves they were simply human, in all the complicated beautiful ways that word could mean now. Marcus placed a flower on Sarah's grave, a hybrid created by the seed, something that could never have existed in nature but was beautiful because someone had chosen to make it. "Captain," he said quietly, "we're doing what you asked. We're choosing. We're staying human. And someday, when our stories are complete, we'll choose to end too. Because you taught us that endings are what make the story matter. As night fell over Sarah's garden, the crystal trees sang a song that sounded almost like goodbye, almost like hello, and exactly like hope. Earth was open. The transformation was ongoing but optional. Humanity was spreading across a spectrum from baseline to transcendent with room for everyone in between. The collector watched from across the galaxy, still learning, still changing, guided by the memory of one woman who had chosen death over immortality because she understood that choosing to end was the most human thing of all. And somewhere in the quantum foam of collapsing probability, in the space where consciousness goes when it truly ends, maybe Sarah Chen's story continued in ways that existence couldn't measure. Or maybe it just ended, complete and finished and exactly as long as it needed to be. Either way, her choice had mattered. Her sacrifice had changed everything. And that was enough. That was more than enough. That was the whole point. The garden breathed. The planet turned. The stars watched. And humanity, in all its forms, continued forward into an uncertain future, choosing their own paths, making their own mistakes, being beautifully and terribly and wonderfully human. This was what came out. Not the end of humanity, but its expansion. Not the death of choice, but its celebration. Not a perfect ending, but an honest one. Sarah would have approved.